Hey, good day. Hi, this is Greg Lewis, City Manager here in Lebanon. Welcome to Lebanon in Depth. We are very happy to be here today. It's a very cold day here. It reminds me of my times in Minnesota, being up in north in the country, and it was like this forever. And it used to drive me crazy to have the winters last forever and have below zero temperatures. And today I know I got up and it was below zero temperature, and since I've been here, I get my anniversary here on February 28th, being here 2 years in Lebanon. I've had such warm, it's been so warm and nice. And now, today, it was really cold. So Andrew Gast-Bray has joined me, our planning and zoning director, and on this cold day, and we're going to have the warm comfort of talking about one of those most warm and fuzzy things you could think of, which is zoning. And I know I started out in life, in the municipal life, as an attorney who was charged with the responsibility of writing a new zoning code. For the first city I had where I was I was the city attorney of this city. It's called Moorhead, Minnesota, and it was about 55,000 people, and I was the city attorney, which meant they had me doing everything. And first thing they had me do is, we need to have you work with a zoning consultant and write the new zoning code. And boy, I spent several years writing, excuse me, the new zoning code. And many hearings on zoning, and we took it all in big whoop, the whole zoning code. It wasn't like amendments, and it was pretty, very intense, and it's kind of excruciating. And so I'm not looking back at it now. I'm saying, well, that was warm and fuzzy. That wasn't warm and fuzzy. That was more cold and prickly. That was a cold and prickly Minnesota on a frozen Red River of the north. But we aren't that way. We're not that way. And I asked Andrew over here today. We'll talk about zoning, and if we have more time at the end, we'll probably expand and talk about some other planning, just kind of what's on the horizon, that sort of thing. But as to zoning, first of all, could you provide our residents watching today and the stakeholders we have here, what's the background on the zoning issues that are now before us?
Well, that's an interesting topic. I think that many people in Lebanon kind of remember a somewhat checkered recent history on zoning. If you remember, there was a master plan that was done a number of years ago, and it led to, and especially in that day and age, everybody assumed that you have a master plan which leads to zoning. And so they did their master plan and they did zoning, and they really hadn't been able, in part because, just like you said, zoning's kind of cold and prickly and a lot to swallow at once.
Yeah.
And you have the fortune of being, we in Lebanon have the good fortune of having a very aware public, which is sometimes hard to get things passed because people ask you tough questions. But I think that's generally a good thing, because then you get a zoning ordinance that's meaningful to people. But the bad side is that it makes it more challenging for things to happen. And I think that it was the consensus that there was just too much. They tried to achieve too much with the last zoning. And so this time we were very careful to say, let's not try to do too much at once. We want people to understand and embrace this. If we especially want new, better things to happen, people have to be comfortable with them. And I think we've been very careful to achieve that. We may have not aimed far enough, frankly, and we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
But I think that the approach was, let's be somewhat conservative. Let's try to do things that really protect the future without creating too much of a mess for everybody today in trying to apply. We don't want unintended consequences. We don't want these other things that don't give us a lot of warning before they present problems. So we looked around at what was everybody else doing. What did we have from the last zoning that was very favorable, but again, they threw out everything because they may not have liked one or two issues in the zoning. This time there were certain things that people were comfortable with from the last time that just didn't pass. That got kind of thrown out when they threw the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, at the same time, we applied for a grant. Let me first say that, so when we redid it this time, we wanted to make sure we had the new master plan in place, which you were instrumental in making happen. Thank you. and that then led to zoning. But at the same time, there had been a grant for an energy efficiency and renewable energy initiative that led to an energy master plan. We took that plan and turned it into and adopted it into that master plan we had just adopted, and that's now the energy chapter of our master plan. Well, that was fortuitous because the state of New Hampshire was issuing grants, and we applied for one of the grants, and in particular we applied for an energy efficiency and renewable energy grant, trying to make sure that we had statutory changes that would help enable energy efficiency and renewable energy. And they gave us resources, and we've done had the opportunity of working with Mike, and we've talked about that in an earlier show.
Yeah, we had Mike over here on the earlier show.
And so that led to a number of zoning amendments, or very small changes, mostly allowing for future more significant things to encourage energy efficiency and renewable energy. But that was a part of this. So that's sort of the background. So here we go. We have the master plan, and we have this new energy chapter of the master plan, and we have a very short window to get this in front of the public. And God bless all these people that worked very hard to get this in front of the public. And the zoning amendments that will be on the ballot in March, I'll go through the process briefly, really started in front of the public as early as August.
So there's been a good amount of time for people to get involved and digest and try to pick this up and see what this is, and kick the tires and see how it's feeling. I should have mentioned Mike McCroy is the person we were referring to, was with the Regional Development Commission. That regional outfit has really been very helpful to us in many ways, and we appreciate them and involvement in that. It was nice to get that. It was like frosty on the cake to get some additional monies through the energy efficiency grant, and that helped us with this chapter, which energy efficiency is a big deal in our area. We obviously, anybody that pays these fuel bills and watches our gas as at the time we go to the pump, and all the things that are happening in terms of costs associated with energy, we know that would be universally a great thing for our community to achieve a greater energy efficiency, save all of some money, and save some costs of government, and a whole bunch of good things. So it's nice we put that in there.
Absolutely.
But let's kind of launch into the amendments that are being under consideration.
Certainly. We looked through and came up with a number of changes that we've put into 7 amendments. There was an 8th amendment that entailed a few things that Council already adopted. I'd like to talk briefly about those at some point. But the ones that will be in front of the voters are the First Amendment, and a lot of these are pretty small.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but they needed to change. Amendment 1 exempts storage sheds of 130 square feet or less from the standard yard setback. Normally, there's a certain protection so that there's not something right on your boundary. But for a storage shed, that's usually a small thing. It's not particularly offensive to the neighbors, and you kind of hate to have it sit right in the middle of your backyard. That was
better to be off on the side.
Yeah. So now it's a 5-foot setback for that, as opposed to other structures like your house.
And I think all of us make use of a utility shed. I know that in my previous places where we resided, that we generally had a storage shed, and generally it'll be off toward the corner, not in the middle of the yard. Middle of the yard was especially for children play and for gardening and other matters. So it's always useful to have a shed and have it on the more on the side. This enables a little bit, probably better qualitative use of your property. Allows you, and still it doesn't infringe on your neighbors because of the nature of the storage sheds.
And as I mentioned, we've been working on this since August, and really that's been received nothing but praise. I haven't heard any complaints about that one at all, and that's unusual in this public process.
Yeah, usually you receive some adverse.
And I'd like to say that really I'd like to praise Lebanon's public, because they had some great comments that were integrated in the course of this. So, the fact that it has taken a long time to get these things just right really was thanks to a lot of public involvement, and I hope that these amendments are stronger and more representative of what Lebanon wants as a result. The second amendment is if you have, these are for only existing lots that are divided by a zoning district boundary line, the right to extend into the other zoning district, and this one is if you had conflicting zones where you have sort of your lot crosses two different zoning areas, and a lot of this was due to the way we had done the old zoning map. We hope when we eventually get to the new zoning map, we'll have eliminated all these vestiges. This is really sort of an administrative way to make sure that people aren't putting the wrong things due to a sort of a map anomaly on the wrong type of lot. So, if you've got a rural lot, you want the rural uses to be there and not through some quirk be able to take, say, an urban use and stick it back on there. So that's all that one's doing. The third...
Makes things more orderly.
Yes, it does, and easier to administer, frankly. The third amendment is allowing... We have a number of schools. Oh, and I should point out that part of the reason we've clumped these into certain categories is that the nature of a zoning ordinance is that you may have some things that are affected on one page and then also in another page, because here you're talking about a use and then here you're talking about a zone. So that's why when people look at the ballot, they'll see something like zoning ordinance sections 201 and 201.8, so that people know that this will be complete and affected in both, and they should look at both of those pages. And I see you actually have one of those copies that will be available at all the polling stations and are available online on the city website. So we hope people will check
People should really use our website. The website is an excellent source. We are making that website as robust as we possibly can. It's thanks to really have Melanie Cooper, our webmaster. She is terrific. And so please take a look at the website with regard to these zoning issues and many other things, but it's a great resource for you.
So also with Amendment 3 is for the residential 2, the R2 district, allowing conversions of pre-existing buildings to be converted. In particular, this was being sensitive to the old schools and allowing them to have other uses in them. There was a sort of a loophole that didn't allow anything to, yes, you could convert them, but you couldn't really convert them into anything. So this is basically fixing some of those problems and allowing office, multifamily, private education, library, museum type uses. So in those buildings,
so we got the enabling going on to better use some of the property, because we think older residences are a great asset to a community. Yeah, but oftentimes uses vary and change over the period of time of a life of a city and the life of community, and so there ought to be able to way to convert those into appropriate types of alternatives.
And well, in particular, this is for things that weren't residences. This would be the buildings, the school buildings.
The older buildings.
So that's what 3 is about. Number 4 is the one that gets a lot of humor associated. It's the chicken amendment, which allows a limited number of chickens in residential zones, and they're hens only, no roosters. They have to be properly contained.
Today they announced that women could go into combat units in the Army now, but we still are not allowed. So we're doing that here. Well, we can't keep roosters. We can't do roosters. My chicken story, because everybody will read this, and you have to have a chicken story.
Okay, fair enough.
My chicken story is fair enough. As I was growing up in days of old, in Kansas, where I grew up, there were Saturday morning children's movies, which I always had to go there and watch Bugs Bunny and stuff. And on Easter, they would have things that PETA people would just hate, because it's just they would die. These were poor, unfortunate chicks, and so you would get a pink chick and a green chick. Now that's not natural. So you have them up there, and you have a drawing of your ticket from the show, and if you want a chick, you got to take a chick home. Well, I want 2 chicks. So in this ordinance, but it couldn't work because both of them turned out to be roosters, And I don't think we should ever die a poor chick, ever. But of course, I have a natural knack for domestic life and animal life, and so that's probably why I'm a good city manager. And in any event, I grew those chickens into gigantic roosters who made a lot of noise. And some people would complain. My mother finally made me turn the roosters over to my uncle, who had a real farm. And she disallowed me my roosters. But here we are. We're out there. We're allowing fresh eggs.
That's right. It's for fresh eggs for people, and this was the most popular, strangely, of all of our amendments.
That's interesting.
And it is interesting. There's a bit of a problem because this is very popular nationwide, and now there's a rooster problem because nobody wants roosters. So there are all these poor, lonely roosters
they're out to lunch
that nobody wants. Sounds like something off of the Isle of Lost Toys with Rudolph.
That's a good change of pace in the amendments.
Yeah. So Amendment 5 is the accessory renewable energy facilities, the energy amendments that we talked about or alluded to earlier. And that's basically not really regulating the power itself, but more regulating the potential possible bad effects or ancillary effects of it. So if you've got a small wind tower in a property, it ensures protection from the neighbors so that the fall zone has to be checked out. If you've got roof panels, solar panels, it's basically ensuring the safety when someone does apply them rather than getting into the technicality of applying them, so that people feel comfortable when their neighbor has something like that put in, that they're safe and they have to obey the safety precautions. But we obviously want more renewable energy and energy efficiency.
Yeah, I think more and more people look at this and see it as an opportunity to explore some to kind of do a pilot on your house to see how, with a solar panel or you put in a wind facility. I've seen some amazing things being done around the United States and here in New Hampshire. So it'll be interesting to see people take advantage of this if this passes.
Great. Amendment 6. This has had probably the most comments. This refers to riverbank protection and wetlands conservation district, and these are meant to protect basically of a multiplicity of possibilities of what they protect. In principle, the three major driving forces were water protection, flood storage, and habitat. There are many other things that go on, and I don't mean to belittle them, but these were the three driving forces. Consequently, we were very conservative into the land that we protected. We hope maybe, if this is successful, that we may extend them someday to get other protections, because obviously it costs us money if we have to do more treatment of the waters, etc. Or, obviously, as we saw with Irene, flooding was tremendous in Vermont. And fortunately, we were spared most of the heaviest rains, but it could easily have landed on New Hampshire, in which case we would have had certain issues. So in order to prevent people from, if that such thing were happening in the future, we were trying to get areas that really shouldn't be developed off the table. And we put in plenty of exemptions for people who their existing property. They won't go from a buildable lot to a non-buildable. That won't happen. We're really very conservative on this, but we also don't want certain precious areas of that are currently very wild. We want them to stay wild in many of the areas, or in areas that we need that are upstream of our water. We want to protect the rivers that dump directly into that. There were already a lot of existing protections from the state, but the state really was encouraging us to go further. They were doing the minimum, and they may not even be able to guarantee the minimum that may devolve someday onto the city entirely. So we wanted to have these protections in place. So it sounds bigger than it really is. It doesn't preclude anybody from doing quality development. It may mean that in some cases where you have a bridge using a sort of a cheap culvert bridge with the culvert in the water, you may have to be in one of these areas a little more careful with how you do a bridge. But it's not intended and not designed to preclude somebody from using their land.
So there's still a balance.
Very much.
I mean, I think all of us have to have the sense of that the things that are changing, and I think the changing is pretty clear. The weather is clearly changing. You know, the climate is adapting to a different, all these differing factors. So that's clearly happening. And the density of our engagement of people with the natural environment also is an increasing matter. And I think that we need to strike the balance, and I think that's what's being worked on here, and a balance has been struck in the community. And hopefully, the people will give it a good viewpoint that is a matter of balance. The absolutism of you can't touch this property ever in terms of regulatory overlays. That's one way out, and the other one is absolutely nothing. So I think this has struck a balance in here. So it's good to get it out there.
And again, this is if there is a problem, we were conservative so that we can adjust in the future based on how this works. So we spent a lot of time looking at every possible scenario, but again, life trains you.
Yes.
So the last one that's on the ballot is the accessory dwelling units. This is a rather small change, but trying to encourage infill in our already existing areas where we already have houses, where we already have infrastructure. And this was all of these, like I say, are straight out of the master plan. So this isn't earth-shatteringly new material, but this is a rather small change to allow people to age in place. So let's say their kids have gone off and they had a huge house and they have a big garage in the back, and they say, it's just, my wife and I, we're going to maybe build a little extension to the house, or we have a back part of the house or a garage that we might convert to a mother-in-law suite, or they keep the house and rent. It's a very small scale, limited in number of people that can be in it. They're basically, it's intended for one family. The owner has to occupy one of the two facilities. It's got to be architecturally controlled, so it blends in with existing neighborhoods. This was really a very small step. I would say the biggest critique is it doesn't go far enough to enable more infill, but it's a good start, and it's got lots of checks and balances to make sure something disruptive of the neighborhood does not happen. Yeah,
there's another balance step to try to accommodate. We try to do infill now because we're trying to, where existing infrastructure is there, we want to try to encourage and support the ability of persons to live in that area, because we need to be all cost consciously about everything we do, because if we start expanding our infrastructure more, that's more cost, more maintenance, and more repair and more replacement. So anything we can do to keep our at the type of density we have in our current existing areas, the better off we're going to be.
Absolutely. Well said.
Now, those are the ones that are beyond the ballot. And now you mentioned earlier there were some that the council considered that are not going to be in the ballot. Could you just reflect on those?
Absolutely. We had to change the purpose statement because we were modernizing. We've modernized our master plan, and we wanted the zoning plan to reflect the goals of the master plan. That's a small change. It's not that the purpose statement is not regulatory in and of itself. So we just wanted to make it consistent. We did modify signs. Now this is only going to really affect commercial interests, but generally in a favorable way. We changed the calculation for area to be a little bit more sophisticated to correspond with modern signs that have geometric shapes. And we also regulated the illumination of those signs to be consistent with our our subdivision and site plan regulations, so that hopefully our illumination standards are consistent throughout all our regulatory process. We also added residential to the general commercial district so that we could allow to have more mixed use and neighborhoods instead of having sprawl, which is one use out in a district. That creates all kinds of problems. We all know that 12A is challenging with traffic, etc. Part of the reason is because you only have one use. It's like having one room dedicated to your socks, one room dedicated to your shoes, one room dedicated to your shirts. So you find yourself in the hallway all the time, going in between. Well, that's sort of what we've done with our mono-use districts. So we're trying to be a little bit more sensitive to something that the residents really wanted, which was more mixed-use, quality places. And so this is just opening the door to that.
That's great. You know, we have like the last 3 minutes or so. I'd like to have you kind of reflect on your assessment of all this and what's taking place, and then kind of point the public to, you know, more what takes place next in terms of any more public involvement, that sort of thing.
Absolutely, that's great. My assessment is these are small, and a lot of people look at this and say, "Oh, do I need to get?" We still want you to go out and vote. It's really important that you go out and vote and let us know how you feel. We've had a lot of public come forward, but it's very difficult in a public venue to really know what the entire public feels until the vote takes place. The people that come to these hearings tend to be focused on one issue, and are they representative of Lebanon as a whole? So we need people to vote. So the next phases is we're going to be getting out there. We're going to have more frequently answered questions, and we'll get those on our website to answer people's questions. We encourage people to come in and ask, well, how does this affect me? You know, oh, well, no, not at all. Or if it does, you'll have to maybe change the bridge to be more like that neighbor that you have rather than this one. Those kinds of things. We want them to come in and find out, or, oh, no, if you've already done that, you're fine. So we want that. We will probably have some more, I hope, more articles. We've had some great articles in the newspaper covering some of the stuff we're doing.
Good.
And we want to keep that going. We also hope to have closer in towards the ballot a Q&A session.
Okay.
Where the people, we invite them to come in and they say, hey, I just wanted to know how this is going to affect me, and we'll have our experts there that can attest to where that came from if they have questions. And then, of course, there's the ballot.
Yes.
So, and that will be in March.
Right.
So that's basically that process, and I hope there are no questions.
Well, I think that's that's good. But I just love so many things about the kind of process we rolled out here. One of the most foremost thing was the master plan. You know, because one of our commitments when we kind of joined into this fray was to take the master plan out of the limbo land it was in, put it into some sort of manageable format, process, bring it forward, get the engagement of all the people, which is amazing, all the people who engaged in the master plan. And then I think this is kind of the trust thing, is that we said we believed in the master plan because it's been so much participation by so many different residents in its development, that we were not going to let it sit on the shelf. And this is evidence, because I think acts speak, for themselves. I mean, words are, people are always saying stuff, but acts speak a great deal. And this is important acts to put before the citizens to see how they feel about these issues. And it's the step of reality, making this reality. Another thing I like is the flexibility of what we're engaged in. Is we're balancing. We're doing a modicum of advancement, because I think a community that does an evolutionary path toward the future versus a revolutionary path where we have the sudden change is I think we'll have a much healthier and well point of view in developing itself. So I'm really happy, and I think that this is a celebration to have a vote on it, and voting is very important, very, very important. Any last words here in our last minute here that of the process, or thoughts that you would think we got to share, Andrew?
Absolutely. I say this is small, but stay tuned. This is that evolutive step. We've got many other things going. Continuing on, zoning is just one thing. We talked about the energy amendments. We have a button-up workshop for the evening of February 7th. So the teaching, this isn't regulatory. This is suggestions on how to be more energy efficient in your home. So we'll be talking about that. We have more work going on in terms of zoning being just one way of making things happen. We're going to be talking about how to encourage development without necessarily requiring it to be a certain way. Say, hey, this will be doing a better job. So if you did it this way, you'll have an easier path to acceptance of this particular development, because this is greener, more sustainable, in line with the master plan. So we've got a lot of things that we're looking at as we move forward that aren't just the heavy hammer of thou shalt not, which is the zoning, or this is what we allow. It actually is more directive and a lot more tools. So stay tuned, and hopefully we'll have the right solution for the right things continue as we go forward.
And these are good steps, and we want to thank everybody for joining us today. Hope you got something out of it. We'll have please, as you watch it on the CATV, follow some of the suggestions that Andrew has about, making sure if you want to know how it applies to you, please contact the Planning and Zoning Office and talk to them, and they'll talk to you. And the more conversations we have, the better. So you all kind of bundle up and stay warm, and we will go ahead with the zoning process is flowing. So. Engage in it. See what you think. First step among many to follow. Thanks a lot, Andrew.
Thank you.